our audience online. If you have any questions, post them online. Okay, now turning to our audience. Thank you so much, Mika. I almost forgot. So do we have any questions from our audience? في حدا عنده سؤال؟ I really enjoyed these three presentations. I felt like it was a great process of learning. Mika, thank you so much for presenting your work. I have a question that could come across because all of you are working with digital methods and you're producing a form of art. An art, in your case, for instance, Mika, that's like you cropped so many of those maps. So, for instance, I would be interested to know the process through which you made that cropping and what eventually you chose to appear to us. If you can, how did that process?
Do you mean like just the different scales that we encounter, like the British Mandate maps, for example? I think a major theme that is like coming through to me as I'm working on this project still is the question of scale and kind of like what the units that make up the thing are, so to speak. And on one level, like it's literally the grains of sand that we keep seeing throughout the video, and in other parts of it, like each map is a unit in a way, and I was interested in kind of blurring those distinctions between like what is making up, quote unquote, the whole, and what does that whole say, and who is saying that that is the whole that is representing the thing. Yeah, I think that was a big part of my thought process, and also wanting to kind of blur the boundaries between, you know, what we perceive as micro and what we perceive as macro, because, you know, both these processes of violence and resistance are playing out on both levels, and sometimes visually also they really start to blend together, and, you know, between like the pixel and the grain and like the units of the map, I really wanted to visually emphasize that convergence.
I feel like I found it quite interesting because it was my first time also. It's been a while that we're looking at maps of Gaza, and I feel like at some point I feel numb now, like for instance, but again, by presenting all of these kind of digital overlaps and positions that you applied over the map, I started feeling I might be seeing something new that I've not seen before. And I think it is because of all of these kind of nuances that you managed to kind of also represent and show. So that was something intentional. So is this something that for the audience, is it directed for the audience, for instance, to see something that they've not seen before, or is that something purely artistic? Kind of, because now I'm thinking about the question of participation simply because you landed in this presentation, like in this panel with Sari and Rafael, who both are kind of part of their practice of working with these digital modes or digital methods. It's the consistent engagement with a public audience. So I was wondering how you think of your practice of art, and I'll extend this question to Rafael, but if you want to address, should I extend it to the two of them, and then?
Can you just say the question one more time, like how I think of the art for an audience?
Yeah, do you think when you're producing that kind of map or superimposition, do you think about how people will respond to it? Who's your audience in this kind of practice? Or is this something that's only kind of limited to art practitioners? What kind of discourse would you ideally situate this artwork within?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think for me it's operating on a few different levels, both for people who maybe look at maps of Gaza from different time periods again and again and look at so many satellite images of Gaza. I think there is always, I think it's very easy to still be seduced by maps, even when we're sort of trained to be critical of them simultaneously. And as I'm making this work, that's something I have to keep reminding myself of. So part of the visual, kind of artistic practice of making this video was also, it is a process of thinking through the maps for me, and it's a process of reminding myself, and hopefully viewers as well, that there is so much latent violence in these forms of representation in the very, physical and visual production of them. And the fact that the map is always, that's kind of where one meaning of projected topographies comes from. Like, it's always something superimposed on this geological, human ground at the same time.
Right, thank you. My question to Raphael possibly is, I don't know if you want to reflect on this process. Maybe how did you navigate working with these people on the reconstruction, digital reconstruction of this? What kind of things you can do and you can't do while working with these communities in your initiative? Where should I be looking to the camera maybe? Or Raphael, Michelle, and Raphael, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think it really depends on the aiming of the communities. For example, in the case of the Fundación Lebuco-Yeguay, they have this huge amount of work over the visibilization of their testimonies or their memories of this place. So when we share or we make this situated testimony with them, they want to share everything and to change the models, like to really be empowered to change the model and to put in the 3D model how are the ways they remember the camp. But there are places like, for example, Borgoña in Santiago, which communities are like not that open to work with the 3D modeling itself. So we started using like physical modeling to not put them in the position of victims again. So yeah, we need to navigate that depending on the memory, so not the memory, on the sensibilities of the people we're working with mainly.
Yes, just to add a little thing, the memories of different spaces of repression are super different. The camp of Lebuco-Yeguay was something like a prison, but we have these other places where they were specially made for torture. So the people inside were not communicating, and also, for example, in Borgoño in Santiago, they had like 90% of the time their eyes like with no vision. They could only be with their eyes free inside their cells. So the kind of memories, and sometimes we talk about sensory memories, because they could not see where they were. So this reconstruction will be very different depending on the memories and the sensibilization that the same community wants to show. And it will always, for us, depends on what the community wants, and not what we want to represent. So we're just like some tools for them.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question for Sari. Sari, you're working with a very interesting context, especially dealing with the Senussi Zawiya. I wanted to know if you had the chance to reflect on how people maybe encountered your installation spiritually eventually, because the Zawiya is a kind of, if I understand it well, if it's kind of a fugitive religious place, right? Where people seek, or especially Sufis maybe seek seclusion. So how did your work around the installation kind of interpreted that kind of very special relationship as you're recalling narratives to decolonize?
Right. I think that there is one element which is a necessary camouflage or ambivalence, because there is, as I said, there's a whole history of demolishing and fighting this spiritual heritage in Benghazi and Libya, and particularly the notion of the Sufi Zawiya. So when the installation is going to be installed in the public space and in different spaces as well, it will not necessarily be directly dedicated to represent itself as a spiritual object, but through an embedded conception of and evocation of the multifunctionality of the Zawiya, that it was not only and also it did not only attracted the community through its spiritual and mystical and its cosmology, it was really also the two other points that I mentioned, the scale and the and the programs, which were agriculture and education, and that was, I think, what really drew the people to this kind of hybrid typology, not necessarily this kind of supernatural aspect of it or the metaphysical aspect of it at a Zawiya. So I think we would be as we haven't still, as you can see, the project is still in gradual development. We cannot determine yet how we expect the audience to receive the spiritual aspect of it. We know that it would not necessarily be direct, as I mentioned, but let's see what happens. As I said, it's more of it's an experiment that is open for accidents as well. So, inshallah khair, as we say.
Inshallah. I was just like thinking how curious I am about the next version of this installation, like after having done the first one. I want to open it up for questions in the room. في حدا عنده سؤال? Anybody with questions that you would like to share? George?
So my question is for Mika. At least the way that I read some of the moving images is there's this relationship between, I'm thinking of the image that is, I guess, simultaneously in a certain sense, both too far and too near. And it creates kind of this incompossibility, right? Like a paradoxical image kind of opens up, and it kind of, this is your kind of way of kind of dealing with the material. So I wanted to hear more about, what you think of this.
Yeah, thank you for that question. A word that's been coming up lately when I think about the sand in my research is this concept of like incomputability, or like how we think about what it means to know something or have access to something. And of course, within, like discourse around remote sensing, there can be such a sort of God complex with having access to this view from above. And obviously that's something I'm trying to problematize in my own work, while, recognizing that it can help us, visualize violence being inflicted in these areas when journalists are being barred from entering them. But simultaneously, that even if we could get so close to the thing, to the material, like you're saying, does that mean that we know it any better? And maybe yes, maybe no. But yeah, it's a really interesting question. Like, at what scale can we say that, like, yes, we know the thing, we can speak for the thing, we can represent the thing? And I show a lot of scales of sand in this video, and maybe we can visualize it a bit better and understand it a bit better, but yeah, I wouldn't say that we're obviously, and the point also is not to know it fully at the same time, of course, because that's part of its power.
Any more questions? Great. I'd like to thank our speakers. Thank you so much, Raphael, Michelle, and Raphael. Thank you, Sari. Thank you so much, Mika.